Okay, well, today we're going to do an instructional video where we're going to teach you in the shop how to build your own shatafa for under $10 using copper tubing, a couple of brass fittings, and a ball valve. What? That was funny. Okay, sorry. So I have questions that I've asked people to go ahead and post yesterday and today. And so we're going to go down those questions and again, give my view on these things. First question was, is this a continuation of your Shatafa New series? Apparently it was. Okay, first question from Michael Tadros. I know your stance on listening to Christian music, but would you say it's a better alternative to worldly music? Okay, actually, I think people don't really know my stance on listening to Christian music. If you've listened to what I've said, I've talked about importing it into our churches, into our community practices. When we talk about listening to it on an individual level, that's a different question. And that is very much between you, your priest, and God. But I would offer this. First of all, I hear a false dichotomy being presented all the time, which is it has to be either cheesy 15-year-old Jesus is my boyfriend music, or else it has to be vulgar, violent rap music. Those aren't the only two musical choices that we have. Hi, I'm Tilo and I'm back. Sorry for the interruption. Looks like we had a little problem with the internet and I should be a little closer here to the signal. Okay, if I have the door open to get some front lighting, if there are any audio issues, if someone could let me know, I would appreciate that. I have the mic a little further away, but anyway, if you can hear me clearly, just let me know. So to continue with the question on the Christian music. So I'd say that the things I discussed before were regarding bringing it into our corporate setting in the church. And now we're talking about the individual listening to it. So I would say at minimum, first, we should be able to understand our theology very well, to become very astute in Orthodox theology, to know exactly what we believe so we can hear when something's not right, and become knowledgeable at some level in Protestant theology so we understand when we hear things coming in what they mean. Very often we're hearing things that I've noticed cops don't pick up on, that I immediately pick up on as a former Protestant. And I know, oh, this is what is meant by that, and this is what is being conveyed from the ethos in that. How's the audio? Good? So this is where I would start, is by becoming very astute in our theology, becoming aware of the other theology. And then once all that's in place and talking to our priest, then for the individual, that's an individual call. I'm just saying these are minimum requirements to be able to do it with some degree of safety, that we're keeping our minds and our hearts orthodox. So I think that covers the individual aspect. The next question is, this one is really, really a profound question. From Nihad. And he's asking about cultural relatability. Do we feel that core social issues have been addressed well by the church in America, or the Orthodox Church for that matter, more broadly, in relation to drug addiction, pornography, same-sex attraction? These are serious social issues that our teens will be faced with. Okay, this is huge. This is really huge. I mean, in a nutshell, I think from what I gather from most people, and I'm not really that directly involved, but what I keep hearing is that we tend to have in the Coptic Church some very Arabic thinking that came over, and some of the stories I hear are frankly a little shocking. So what I'd like to talk about in the social issues that we have as a whole and with the church, these are great examples. So first of all, we need to begin by understanding that there is in our anthropology, humanity is a tripartite being, which is body, soul, and spirit. And the church's role is fundamentally to deal with the spiritual aspect of the human being. Now, there are coming times when we encounter problems because these three aspects are not neatly compartmentalized into three parts. The parts blend over and affect each other. And so we need to understand there's no clear line where we can say this is where, the mind and the soul and the body separate. We don't do that. We can't do that. So we need to also be aware that there are some issues. For instance, if you had diabetes, you wouldn't be going to your priest, I hope. You would be going to your doctor. And in the same way, if you had some mental struggles and mental issues that were clearly on the psychological side of things, we have, therapists to deal with those things. There's a young lady who was commenting on one of my posts about a priest trying to move into the self-help movement, and she was in the mental health business and saying, listen, this is my field. I'm the mental health specialist. You should stay over in your field where you're the spiritual specialist and let me talk to the mental health questions and mental health issues. And I thought this was very insightful, that there is a time that we need to refer things over to mental health professionals. And we very often, from what I understand in the Coptic Church, we have a stigma around mental health care, which is utterly wrong. We should never, ever stigmatize somebody who struggles with these things. To give you a little background, I spent many, many years as an addict. And, I've been clean for a couple of decades now, but I can tell you that what I was doing with my use of drugs was trying to self-medicate a mental health problem. And I have issues that now I've learned, I'm struggling with. I struggle with the issues of depression or anxiety. And I'm learning to do that on the spiritual level and with the guidance of my priest and with information and learning I've gotten from mental health professionals, and kind of taking these and putting them together and synthesizing them into my struggle to be saved and to be whole and to be complete. So I think it's important to understand that people who have various struggles, we need to understand what those struggles are and who are the right people to address these struggles. Are we looking good? And I think I'm going to go down this list that he offered because I think it's very important. Drug addiction, I think I touched on that a little bit. There are professionals that deal with drug addiction. And to stigmatize somebody who has a drug problem as some other category is wrong. We all understand that we're all born with sin. We're all born with propensities to do various things which are not in keeping with what we were created to be in God. And that being the case, as we're going through our own various individual struggles, it is very wrong to single out certain struggles and say, oh, these ones are indicative of a really, really rotten person, and these ones are the right kind of struggles to have. Now, I do agree that there are certain struggles that are more destructive to us than other struggles. Yes, but that is not to say that makes you any lesser of a person. And I'm going to go even further than that. And I'm going to say the people who struggle with the things which are the most destructive to them, and they're born with some very strong propensities toward things. You know, we don't even understand, from what I gather truly in psychology, what is chemical, what is brain, what is mind, what is thought. There aren't any real clear lines as to nature and nurture. And so we can't absolutely define it, as I think very often those in a church community who aren't really putting much thought into this believe it's all just a matter of your decision. It's all just a matter of your will. Well, that's just not the case. People are born with certain propensities, just like some people are born with a propensity for diabetes and other things. So when somebody is struggling with addiction, this is never something that we should be pointing toward as reflective of the person. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go further, and I'm going to say that people who struggle with these very, very difficult issues have more respect from me than those who may struggle with lighter issues. As I'm saying this, I'm going to jump into the next one, which is same-sex attraction. Now, there are clearly people that have a propensity towards same-sex attraction. And with our culture as it is, going around and really enticing and inviting everybody to indulge every desire that they have, and to chastise religious people who tell you to struggle against these problems. Somebody suffering from this struggle, being a Coptic Christian with same-sex attraction, that person, for them to decide not to go with our culture and embrace and indulge this, but to realize they have a very heavy cross to bear, because this is a tough one. I mean, you think about it, this isn't something that you can just fast from certain days a year and certain hours of the day. This is something you're really trying to fast from your entire life, all the time. That is such a tremendous struggle for somebody to have. And if they're already going against the grain of our culture in order to say, hey, I'm going to struggle with this and I'm not going to accept it as something that I'm going to act out on. And keep in mind, the action is very different than the impulses. And if somebody has made that decision that they're going to struggle against it, this is huge. I think we can't strongly enough commend somebody undertaking that kind of struggle. That is a tremendous battle for somebody to wage. And for them to not listen to our entire culture and to say, I'm going to go ahead and follow my faith and I'm going to battle with this anyway, they should receive nothing but applause from the church. Nothing but applause. This is something to be highly respected and admired, somebody taking up that kind of a battle. And so the idea of people gossiping about them or looking down on them or pointing fingers at them, this is utterly, utterly repulsive to the Coptic ethos, to the Christian ethos that I have understood, which is to stand by the struggling person and help them each time they fall to get back up. And as long as they're struggling, as Abuna Daniel taught me long ago, the struggle is the victory. And as long as you are still struggling, you're winning. That this is the objective. The objective of the enemy is to get you to quit and to throw down your sword and your shield and to go indulge yourself. And as long as somebody is struggling, not only should we be standing by them, not only should we not be gossiping about them or spreading rumors about them, my God, this is unthinkable. We should be applauding and encouraging and looking to help them in any way we can with this tremendous undertaking. So again, and even in the mental health thing, so if people are struggling with this, from what I understand, a person can go to a therapist and say, listen, I'm convinced through my religious beliefs that this is not something I should act out in behavior, and I want some help to help me cope with how to have these feelings and not act on them. And you can get help from, I think, a mental health professional to do this when you set the parameters for them of what you want from them, just in the same way we can go to our priest. But honestly, what I would recommend to any Copt, if anybody talks to you about somebody having struggles, and they're actually somebody that's struggling with it and not demanding the church give into it and change its ethos and its beliefs, but it's somebody actually struggling with it for many years or at all. If that somebody comes to you to talk about such a person, I would hope you would put them in check hard. Like, how dare you? This person is fighting a major battle that you'll never even understand. And shut that down immediately. That has no place in the church. And our mental health professionals that we do have in the church and all around us are the people who are very well equipped to deal with a lot of these problems. And I think our priests would do well to recognize when somebody is struggling with mental health problems and direct them to the appropriate professionals as they work with their spirituality and their soul, that the professional in that field can help them with the coping mechanisms and with the struggles and with how to navigate this life in this way. As I said, as one who has had problems and self-medicated them and does struggle with some issues of depression and anxiety, I can say that this is just an ongoing coping, battling, learning how to adjust certain behaviors and how to talk it through with somebody, how to retrain our thinking. These are the roles of mental health professionals. Not everything is a spiritual problem. The mind is a reality, and it is a part of the human composition that God created that reflects mind as creator has mind and rational thought. And so I really believe that our spiritual guides are in the spiritual guide business. They have no business being in the mental health business, to be life coaches or to try and be, your mental health therapist. There's a place where these do cross over as a spiritual guide, yes. But when there's a recognition of mental health problems, this goes to the professional in that field. And thank God we are seeing more people in the church going into that arena of mental health care. And so it's wonderful. I was able to find for myself, when I needed it, a Coptic therapist. And it was wonderful because she really was able to relate and understand my framework within which I was working as a Coptic Christian. All right, I think we're back again. I apologize. I don't know. I'm on a different network now to the house, so let's see what that does. I'm so sorry, but at least it was kind of at the end of the last answer. I have a question here from a Minakalta, and he asks, why does Tilo suck? How we get rid of Tilo? Why is Tilo having a Q&A? He seems to not have been able to understand the simple instruction of one question. So if anybody can help Mr. Kalta to learn the difference between this many and this many, feel free to contact him. The next question. Love you, Mina. Could you talk a bit about monasticism? Any advice, albeit as a married person, for one considering a monastic calling? Yes, I have great advice for somebody considering monasticism. Don't ask somebody on an internet video, and don't ask somebody on Facebook. You ask your priest, you ask monks, you ask abbots, you go to the people who know if you think you might want to go in this direction, but you do not ask people on Facebook. Go to the people, again, the experts who know about this, please. Okay, next question. Do Martians speak Coptic? From Christine. And Christine Agabi Habashi, I want to give a little shout out to her. She has been wonderful, and I believe she is somebody who's in the mental health field, as well as Abraham Shafiq, that these would be great people if you want to kind of maybe get directed to, which direction to go, to get some help with, is this something I should see a mental health professional about? These would be great people to just shoot them a quick message and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Is this something I should see a therapist about, and maybe see if I can get some help about it? Because really, for me, I'm trying to get to heaven. I don't care if I got to get a personal trainer and a therapist and a psychiatrist and 2 priests. And I actually had all of those going at one time, believe it or not. Whatever it takes, I want to get there. So whatever it takes to get me peace and to get me in balance, that's what I want to do. And so these would be some great people to just kind of get a little guidance from. Maybe they can steer you in the right direction. But please, please, take the stigmas off of these things. This is utterly ridiculous. This isn't, 7th century Saudi Arabia anymore. We understand a little bit about psychology and mental health issues, and we have great things to help. And we really, at the core of our Christian ethos, ought to be applauding the people who struggle with these really serious problems and look up to them as really examples of what a struggle should look like and how we should be struggling against our problems and our predispositions that we all have that aren't right. Chris Baselios, Mr. Potato Salad. God, I love him. I know I always come off as silly and mundane, but this time I'm being serious. As someone who is not born into Coptic Orthodoxy, and as someone who's an introvert, how did you fit yourself into this religion? How did you make these relationships with people? Egyptians aren't really welcoming, especially to those who are not born in their culture. So I want to know how you did it. That is a tremendous question. So this really isn't going out to Copts. This is going out to converts and inquirers. On my webpage, you'll find a blog on adjusting to an Egyptian parish, where I've very much written about this. And I think it's important to begin with you being an outsider in any group. You walk into a biker bar wearing a bow tie and a suit and a vest, you're not going to feel real comfortable either, and they're certainly not going to run over and hug you and say welcome. You walk into any group, you walk into any group where you're the individual outsider, and you're going to have this natural alienation. So I think a good way to begin is to not take the American approach of demanding your rights and demanding you get recognized. You take the approach of humility, and you take the lowest seat, like Christ said. And for me, I was just grateful to be able to pray with the elder Copts and to be around them and to be able to worship with them. And if they didn't welcome me, okay, I still got for free what their ancestors paid persecution and martyrdom to receive. So the beginning point for me was not demanding anything. I'm going to go in, sit in the back. I'm going to put my head down. There are things that convey humility and submission to others that I think are very wise to learn. When you encounter somebody, you don't hi and then get all upset when they don't smile back and give you a big hug. If you're in a Coptic parish, you put your head down, you put a gentle smile on your face, and you pat your chest. And you don't look up and say, I want to see your response. You just smile and put your head down, pat your chest, and move on. And over time, this will convey, I'm not here to demand. I'm not here to change you. I'm just here, grateful to be here, and I'm glad to be around you. And I don't want anything from you. And I'm talking about now from the inquirer end, from the visitor end. And you just take your lowest seat and convey humility. Don't demand, don't push, don't grab, and learn some of the cultural responses like the patting of the chest and the looking down. As long as you have a few people there, this is key. A few people in any parish, you'll be fine. I don't need a welcoming committee. I don't need the whole church to put me on their shoulder and have a parade and say, oh, look at the convert. I don't need that. Really just a few people to make me feel at home and answer some questions, embrace me. You want to know the single biggest thing you can do, now I'm talking to Copts, to make a convert feel welcome? Invite him to your home for major feasts. Give him Egyptian food, bring him around the large extended Egyptian family, and that will make the convert feel very much welcomed and at home. That's probably the most effective thing you can do. And then befriend them outside of church. That's huge. So really, to answer the question, I didn't demand anything. I was there to study and to worship. You show up on time for liturgy. There's another one. Show up at 10 minutes before the liturgy begins. Every week, be humble, put your head down, don't demand anything. And over time, the Copts have a very good ethos. They really do. And over time, they're not like Americans that are going to jump up and grab you and hug you because they're trained to do that. This isn't how they are. They're suspicious of outsiders. Another thing I would say to the convert is you show some compassion, because the fact is, while you're a small individual minority in that church, they're a small individual minority in America. You have compassion for them as minorities, and you have some compassion understanding that they've been a persecuted minority, a religious minority in their own country for hundreds and hundreds, at 1,400 years, they've been a persecuted religious minority. So that being the case, of course, they're skittish around outsiders. Of course, they're suspicious. I mean, I would be, you would be. So that's the case. Have some compassion for that. Have some allowance for that. Let them be skittish. Let them look at you sideways. Let them check you out and make sure you're not up to something and that you're not here to try and change them and bring your religion and your music and your practices into their church. But you don't come there as somebody who's there to save them with your wonderful new innovations that you're going to bring them from America. You're there as the student to sit at their feet to learn from them. This is what I say to the visitor, to the inquirer. You come as the student to learn, not as the savior to come and bring them into the 21st century and fix everything that's wrong with their parishes. These people have been at this for a long time. They know what they're doing and they're good at it. So you're better off to learn from them than to try and be the one who thinks you're there to instruct. So again, it's back to humility. It's back to learning their ethos and who they are, and don't demand anything, and constantly be learning and look for opportunities to serve. And not service where you're looking sideways saying, look at me, I'm doing this. Look at me, I'm doing that. But when you do it, you put your head down and you look down, and you're not trying to get eye contact and trying to get people to notice you. You're just there to serve. The cops know this. This is their culture. This is their ethos. It's one of humility and service. And you're not going to fool them by going around doing service, looking at them going, oh, do you see what I did? Do you see what I did? They're not going to get fooled by that. These are sharp people. So genuinely go in there with humility and service. Put your head down, look at the floor, and serve them. And in time, they'll finally start to soften and say, okay, this one's for real. This one's not here to try and change us and to fix us. This one's not just passing through. This one means it. He's at church every week early. He's serving. And yes, I remember hearing the stories of St. Moses the Black and the strong, Jore. And it was wonderful when I saw how they berated him with the most horrible insults. And in his humility, he said, yes, you're right, I'm not worthy, and walked out. And they went after him and said, okay, we get it. You're for real. Your humility is real. Come back in and let's train you now. This, for me, is the model for the convert, and the model for the inquirer is Moses the Strong, because he demanded nothing. He knew he would be grateful just to be able to be among them. And in time, they embraced him. And today he's a saint, one of the most revered saints in our church, because of his response, because he wasn't the American demanding his rights. Instead, he was the humble man who accepted any insults thrown at him. So in the same way, I would say to any outsider, take him as your example, follow his example. And these are the same sort of people that were there at the time of St. Moses, the same type. You do this and you stay with this and you accept this and you take your bottom place in humility to learn, and in time you will be embraced by that community. They're sharp. They'll see it, but you've got to show it to them first. And it took me a few years, and finally I began getting smiled at and embraced by angry old Egyptian women who don't smile at anybody, and they were smiling at me. So yes, I've done it, so I can tell you I know it works and I know how to do it. And frankly, it wasn't something that I did as a designed plan to get accepted, because getting accepted wasn't really a concern of mine. I was there to worship God. God was there. I was there to learn from them. They were there. I didn't need anything. I was good to go. But over time, surprisingly, I was accepted. But now that I was accepted, I kind of looked back and said, how did that happen? Okay, now I can help you with a roadmap and help you to do the same thing. But again, this isn't something you can fake. It has to come from a genuine and sincere humility before them, understanding these people have something really special. And you need to lower your head and become their disciple, not their teacher. From Justin Thomas, aka Florida Man. Maybe a progression of the theological shifts you've had to make as you converted would be good. I guess what I'm saying is covering some of the things you had to unlearn from Protestantism might be helpful. Maybe even just one topic at a time if you're to keep these going. Anthropology, theology proper, Christology. Yeah, this is great. So I am going to just touch on one, and that would be in areas where the well was poisoned, as in the areas of icons, Saint Mary, intercessions of the saints. In these areas, I would have done so much better coming in with a blank slate with no religious knowledge whatsoever, rather than having Protestant understandings of things. Because, you know, if you take a sheet of paper that's filled with wrong writing and try to erase it all so you can rewrite everything, that's a lot harder than taking a blank sheet, which, by the way, is another reason why I say the importation of Protestant materials and songs and all these other things, that they're writing the wrong thing on the paper. It's not a stepping stone. It's a stumbling block, because having to unlearn these things as we become Orthodox has been very difficult for us. We already had an understanding that icons were idolatry, intercessions of the saints were necromancy. You know, we had very clear understandings of what these things were. Whereas if I had had none of that training, I'm going to digress a little bit into some theology, and if you don't track, it's okay. Gnosticism was a dualistic religion that separated the physical from the spiritual as two distinct realities, and the one didn't really affect the other. Protestantism does carry a lot of those dualistic tendencies. There's you're born again, there's a perfect spiritual reality, but then there's your fallen physical reality. But as long as your spiritual reality remains perfect because it's in Christ, then the physical reality doesn't have an impact on the spiritual reality, because that's always perfect because it's like Christ. And so it really kind of separates these two worlds. Well, in the same way, like iconography, we understand the word symbol, by the way, for those who don't know, symbol means to throw together with. We often think of symbol in the wrong way, as something separate from the reality. The fact is, symbol is together with the reality. This is symbol. So when we understand iconography and sacraments and these different things, we understand the spiritual and the physical joined together as inseparable realities. And as a Protestant, I had understood them as separate realities. And so all of this really unfolded to me when I learned about the incarnation of Christ, which was the ultimate joining of the physical to the spiritual. This is what the incarnation was. And once that came into my understanding, Orthodox soteriology, Orthodox Christology, which is to say, you know, God and man uniting in Christ. Once I started to get that, then all of it started to fit. Like this separation of the physical and spiritual, this separation of God and man was an Old Testament kind of picture, that now they were joined back together in Christ. And so this picture wasn't the same. So I found that once I could join these back, certain things really appealed to me as a human that I had been rejecting for so long. One of the biggest ones was crossing myself. When I looked it up and I see historically, I'm seeing it in Tertullian around 200 AD. It definitely had to predate him. So I'm like, this goes back to the beginning here. And then I said, okay, since that goes back that early all over the world in all the churches, I'm okay with that one. I'm going to cross myself. I'm still an inquirer. I'm not even a catechumen yet. And I did it, and my gosh, it was like a Labrador hitting the water. You know, I had a Labrador who had never swam before and was scared of the water till I finally went in, and she went in after me. And when she did, bam, it's like, whoa, I'm a Labrador. And that's how I felt the first time I crossed myself. Like, this was very real and natural. Like, I should have been doing this. This feels so right. This is so human. And to take the spiritual and put them together with the physical is a very human thing. But it was something that I believe my Protestant theology made much more difficult for me to accept. And it was actually a stumbling block, not a stepping stone. So I think that just using those couple of examples, I think that should be helpful. From John Hallam, what Egyptian custom confuses you the most? We have some great comments here. I don't know about customs. The shoe thing is kind of funny. The foot thing about crossing your legs and showing the bottom of your foot. We don't have those foot issues in America. So I think the foot thing is probably, you know, and calling somebody a shoe, it's like, what? It's a shoe. Shoe's no big deal. That foot and shoe thing, that may be one of the more kind of like, what's that about type of customs. But I understand what it means culturally, but in my culture, it really doesn't kind of connect the same way. We're kind of into shoes in America, you know. So Matt, okay, forgive me, I don't know how to do this guttural sound, but Raleigh, or I can't do it. Sorry, Matt, I apologize. He's re-asking a question that he asked a couple of times before on the last video, and so I'm going to address this, and I'm going to try and be careful how I address this. I've seen the post regarding Abuna Anthony Messa and STSA, and I've got a couple questions surrounding it as an observer. And he's got 4 questions here. 1, do you think the posts regarding Abuna Anthony or STSA were personal attacks? No, they were never intended to be personal attacks. If you notice, what I have been talking about are behaviors and categories, doings. The doing of things is what I have been addressing. Certain practices, and it's all been about practices, even if it's talking about whose sermons or whatever. These are all just practices. This is not talking about a person. A person is not the practices. I want to make this really clear up front because I know a lot of people have been following this. Abuna Anthony is a Coptic priest. And I would have no reservations whatsoever at any time of taking communion from his hand, of having him absolve me of my sins. He is an absolutely legitimate ordained Coptic priest. And I will go further and say, I truly believe he has the best interests of the Coptic people and his parishioners at heart. I absolutely do. I think this whole idea of trying to call people names and, you know, oh, they're trolls, or trying to analyze somebody's psychology and try to speak to the motives of why they're doing what they're doing and they're after my fame or whatever any of this other stuff is. Honestly, that has no place in the discussion. I absolutely believe he has the best interests of the Coptic people and his parishioners at heart. And I think this is a good general rule for all of us, whether it's political or religious discourse, to start with the presumption that somebody isn't there trying to hurt people on purpose, whether it's me or him or anybody else. We're not trying to get off on harming others. If you're taking the time to pursue religion and to discuss religion, it means you really want something good. And you want to share something good that you think is important for others and for others to have. So we need to begin with that presumption, and I absolutely presume that about Father Anthony. I absolutely presume only the best in his motives or intents. Nothing I have said do I believe goes to his person or character. I am not at all saying why he does anything the way he does it, or what his thinking is, or any wrong motives, anything like that. What I'm talking about are simply the acts themselves and what I believe to be the impact of them that is not being realized by many Copts. And that's what I'm here talking about, are the actions themselves and how I believe they're impacting people in the long run and in the short run. Things like, you can't import something from Protestantism without giving a thumbs up to Protestantism. You can't. You can't bring a song in and not be pointing at the person who wrote the song as somebody good to listen to. And there are a lot of things there that are harmful, in my view, to an Orthodox person, even if the thing I'm giving you isn't even in itself harmful. I'm pointing you to people who have a lot of harmful things. And if I'm handing you their things secondhand, why wouldn't you just go get it firsthand and avoid the middleman? Is that really something that we would want? And so this is an ongoing discussion. But no, I absolutely have respect for what he is trying to do. And I do love him and I pray for him. And I have nothing bad to say about him or his character, because I would have to spend a lot of time in person with him to try and comment on who he is or what his motives are. And I have no such experience to make such a judgment. You would have to spend a great deal of time with somebody to make a judgment about who they are in their heart and what their intents and motives are. And you certainly would be foolish to do that based on Facebook posts or videos. And I would not. So I think that covers the first one. These are not personal attacks. They're all about the things themselves and the impact that I believe they're having. Why did I choose to address this on social media? Did I try to address it privately or to the bishop privately? No, I did not. And the reason I went to social media was because there is a campaign launching this weekend, which very much looks like it's essentially a franchising. They're charging $45 for you to go there and learn about whatever it is they're doing, which I think we pretty much know what they're doing, and for you to import it into your parish. And I don't know exactly what materials or resources are going to be exported into all these parishes, but that really, first of all, seems to me like the place of a bishop to be going in and guiding and directing what goes into an entire diocese or into an area. This doesn't seem like the role of a parish priest. Parish priest, I think, is supposed to care for his parish. But now with this going nationwide and going into all these other parishes, this isn't any longer somebody dealing with his parish. He's going into every parish, as it were. And that's what prompted me to go ahead and do this. Now, I also know that for at least 15 years, going back to a bishop who commented on a plagiarized sermon 15 years ago or 10 years ago, that for many years, many people far greater than I have tried to address this issue. Many people. And that being the case, I did honestly presume there was no point in my trying to address it directly. So many people had. And not only didn't it get addressed, it was moving very much in the opposite direction and growing. That being the case, I presumed, since this is something done in public, on social media, Pope Shenouda said, sins committed in private be addressed in private, sins committed in public be addressed in public. And I'm not calling this a sin, but I'm saying the principle applies that the sphere in which the influence happens is the sphere in which you address it. And this being done on social media and very publicly, and nobody's coming to me asking me permission to send the video to my news feed. In the same way, I'm looking at it and saying, okay, if that's what it is, it's in the public sphere, I'm going to address it back on the social media public sphere. I think those of you who know me know that I'm not shy. If this were something that I thought was any chance of being helpful, I'm not shy about things. I would be more than happy to talk in person. As a matter of fact, if somebody, if Father Anthony wanted to talk to me in person and asked, hey, can I talk to you in person? I would buy the plane ticket and go out there. I just honestly felt after 15 years and such far greater people than I, having spoken of this, my speaking of it directly really wouldn't have any impact. And I know many people who have spoken to him personally and have told me that they have had no impact. And so that being the case, I just decided, with it all being public anyway and on social media, That's how I would address it. So that, I'm sure, is not a satisfactory answer to everybody. But I think my willingness, if he wanted to talk to about it in person, to pay for the ticket and fly out to DC and talk to him, should at least be some indication that I'm being sincere about this and I'm being open to it. You know, I'm not trying to hide from anything. So here I am, and you all know my number. So call me. I'll get on a plane. I will come see you if you want. And even if, and I'll go a step further, I believe I would be of no impact whatsoever, I would still pay for the ticket, even if I'm convinced I would be of no impact. So I hope, even if you don't agree with me, that you understand at bare minimum, you know, this is intellectual honesty as far as I can take it. Is there a stepping stone into Orthodox Christianity? If so, isn't that STSA? I don't believe so. I believe that for 2,000 years, we've had a church. We don't have to ask, you know, oh, was there a stepping stone? No. When St. Paul talked about milk and solid food, he wasn't talking about the Gnostic religion as a stepping stone into Christianity. He wasn't talking about Nestorianism as a stepping point into Christianity. He was talking about fundamental basic teachings as a gateway into more complex theology. This is what the stepping stones are. This is what the milk and meat are. The milk is not a different religion to get you halfway into the true religion and having to reverse a bunch of things. No, I don't know where people got that idea. And I don't like, I'll be frank with you, I don't like the condescension, because it's always people talking about some other person who is too unspiritual and carnal and too stupid to handle the real deal. I don't buy it. I don't agree with it. I have taught junior high, high school, college, and let me tell you, they're not stupid. And yes, they are engaged. When I give them the floor and say, I'll stay as long as you want, it's 3 to 4 hours. So don't tell me that those people are too stupid or too uncommitted to handle the truth and the difficult truths of the gospel. I'm not buying it. From firsthand experience, I'm not buying it. I sit down and go into complex theology with these high school and college kids, and they are fully engaged for hours, and they want to know more. They're hungry. I think that we're not giving people enough credit. I think you don't go down to the bottom shelf with them. You hold it up here, and you lift them up to where it is. That's what we do. We pick others up. And even if there is a stepping stone, which there are, fundamental teachings into more complex teachings, it's not a separate religion. Where would you get the idea that a different religion is a stepping stone that we ought to import into our religion? How does that even make sense to anybody who has looked at any of the 2,000 years of Christian history? How can you make that conclusion? I mean, this is just, come on, you know? All right, I think that covered that question. All right. Is there a way of taking the good and leaving the bad from heterodox material? Yes, there is. Just like you can eat that part of the puffer fish that won't kill you. 5 minutes? I think it's almost over. Yeah, there's a part of the puffer fish that you can eat that won't kill you, and the whole rest of the fish will. Yes, there's a way to do that. And only an expert chef knows how to get that part and cook it. Would I hand that puffer fish to a bunch of people who knew nothing about it? Are you crazy? I'm going to kill them. No, I'm not going to hand them a puffer fish. Now, yeah, for somebody who is very astute in his theology and very well studied, the best sources for apologetics are in Protestant circles. And I study them and have studied them and read them. They're unparalleled in the field of apologetics, because this is something we as Orthodox haven't really gone into. And there are many things in philosophy that the West has gone into that we haven't, that are, I personally think, are amazing. But this is a puffer fish we're talking about here. You don't go eating just taking a bite off of that thing. You better first become an expert, which means, yes, once you're an expert in your own theology and truly understand it, and then truly fully understand the entire Protestant ethos and religion, Now you can go pick out the piece of the puffer fish and eat it. But until then, no. And the wrong, absolute wrong people you hand a puffer fish to is an unskilled chef, to the new chef in chef school. That is the last person you're going to hand that puffer fish to. So yeah, there are some nuggets. I mean, we all know as Orthodox, C.S. Lewis is like, honorary Orthodox to us. But you don't go handing a puffer fish to an amateur chef, or much less to somebody who's never even cooked before. I mean, what are we thinking here? So yeah, there are some things of value, but as far as things that are not related to things we have really had occasion to cover, but as far as everything required in the development of us spiritually to get us to heaven, that's all in the church. It always has been. We have 2,000 years of luminaries, martyrs, fathers, monastics, brilliant theologians and scholars, 2,000 years worth. Once you've mastered and exhausted all of that to develop yourself spiritually, fine, go read Joel Osteen's Best Life now. But I think you won't want to anymore. But start by learning all of that other stuff first. Then, okay, then you can go have your best life. But you'll realize you're not going to want your best life now. You're going to be looking for your best life after this life. And that stuff won't be relevant to you anymore. So I hope that answered the question. And somebody else asking why the criticism started again since this has already been dealt with. Well, it hasn't been dealt with. Honestly, this issue hasn't been dealt with. Voices have raised and there have been rumblings. And then, forgive me for this, because I'm going to be a little too frank and I'm probably going to get myself in a little bit of trouble. But yes, the voices raised, some rumblings happened. We said, look, we've got an infection going on here. And very often, some people, I don't know who they are, put a bandage around it to hide the wound so it looked like you couldn't see it anymore. But it was there festering and growing all along. It didn't go away. And I think we have a cultural issue with that kind of way to fix a problem, is to hide it, to sweep it under a rug and pretend it's not there. And then it just grows and grows until bam. And what prompted this, like I said, was this franchising thing, where one parish is going and franchising itself somehow into all these other parishes. And that's where I finally said, I need to speak up. I don't want that in my diocese. And I've talked to too many cops. I don't want them being handed these materials. These are puffer fish. I don't want them being handed a puffer fish. They don't know how to dissect it. And they don't realize all of that poison around it. So this is kind of what prompted me to finally start speaking up. And my prayer is that our bishops will either stand up and say, we do not approve of Protestant sermons, written materials, or music in our parishes, and we are not going to allow it anymore. We don't approve of this. Or for them to say, yes, we affirm Protestant music, materials, and sermons in our parishes. Then we can make an informed decision on what to do. But not saying anything and pretending it's not there and hoping it just goes away and just covering it, that's not how you deal with a problem like this. Because not doing something is the same as a yes in practical terms. In functional terms, doing nothing is the same as a yes. So I really would love it if our bishops would say yes or no, but say something. You know, the Synod has spoken about the music, and people seem to have ignored the Holy Synod, and they're still singing the songs, even though the Synod spoke about this. Well, I would like to see some bishops stand up and say, I'm sorry, in my diocese, the Synod has spoken. This will not happen anymore. Great. Or say, yes, I don't care what the diocese said or the Synod said. I'm going to allow it in my diocese. Fine. But at least let me know where you stand, please. Please, I'm a convert. I want to know where my bishops stand, where our church stands on things. That's not too much to ask. I really don't believe it is. Anthony Tawadros asks, does Anba Serapion currently welcome Father Anthony into our diocese? The answer is I have no idea. I don't talk to our Metropolitan. I've only said hi to him a couple of times. And I actually had one meeting with him with somebody else, and we're talking about soteriology. And it was more of an instructional meeting. So the answer is I don't know, but I would absolutely presume, in the absence of anything else, of course he's welcome in our diocese. Of course. I would not see any reason why he wouldn't be to our Metropolitan. And until I hear something where he says no, the presumption is yes. So I have no idea how much about any of what's been going on in the parish and with the Protestant sermons and with the, with all of this stuff. I have no idea how much he knows about anything to make a decision on. How would I know? I'm just the biker American guy who goes to his little ethnic parish on Sunday. Not connected, sorry. UC is asking, why do you hate me? But see, the problem is that I absolutely love UC. UC is one of my favorite people in the world. She's one of my favorite people at my entire parish. So UC, of course, I adore you. My wife adores you. My whole family adores you. I'm going to urge my son to name my first grandchild after you. I absolutely love you, UC. Okay. And UC answered her own question. Wrong. UC, I love you. I'm sorry. I love you. You complete me. All right. Next question. What would you say to those cops who claim they have never benefited from sermons they heard growing up in church and that they find in the evangelical Protestant sermons to be beneficial? I can't speak to what you have found beneficial and what you haven't. I can say that you're asking me about individual parishes, and I can't tell you. I can't tell you if the teaching was something that connected and why it didn't connect, why you didn't connect it is another big question to ask. I don't know about what spirituality you received growing up, why you didn't see the relevance of it. This is too broad for me to answer. But I can say this. I have not yet gone into a parish and talked to a college or high school group that wasn't completely engaged with what I was saying. So I think that, there is something to be said for connecting. And I don't think the right way to connect is to bring in another religion to get them to connect. I think maybe the whole delivery issue can be an issue, but I think I would speak this to the people who are teaching, which is learn the relevance and importance of the thing you're teaching. And once you really catch it, you will speak with an authority and with an enthusiasm and with a fire about it that they will see the relevance. So I think that would be helpful for people who are teaching. But more than anything, we're not here for entertainment. Whether you connected and it gave you goosebumps, or if you're like me and fell asleep through the homily, it doesn't really change the fact that Jesus Christ is present here and in the sacraments, and that these things are the relevant things to save your soul. So even if you didn't really find them overly emotionally exciting, really that's kind of not the point anyway. We're here to try and get to heaven. Next one from Justin. Woody Guthrie or John Prine? Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, yeah, I really respect Woody Guthrie as being the father of these things. I mean, he is unparalleled, except for maybe Bob Dylan, as far as songwriting. He's as big as it gets, maybe next to Dylan. But then when it comes to just the full musical song package and just the really fun music, I love John Prine. So they're kind of two different categories a little bit, so I can't really compare the two. All right, and most of you have no idea what I even just talked about. This is going to be the last question. It's from George Raleigh. I can't do it. I'm sorry. But from George Golly, the deacon. And And I'm sorry, by the way, yesterday when I called that guy Gene Paul, I guess his name, I mispronounced it, and I'm sorry. It's John Paul. So apparently he's a Catholic or something. So I really didn't mean to offend anybody from the Catholic Church by mispronouncing it. Okay, so George is changing his question. If we truly believe that the church has not done enough to keep the youth, are we not insulting our mother? Who decides what our mother has done is inadequate? Or is this just an example of how I know better than anyone else, including my mother? Okay, this is a really interesting question. The question is about the church doing enough to keep the youth. Okay, so I'm going to start by definitions. The definition of church. The church would be all the apostolic churches since the beginning, which for a Copt would be at minimum, according to 99% of Copts, all of the Oriental and Eastern Orthodox Christians would comprise the church. So when we ask, has the church done enough? Well, how could you answer that? It's so broad. So now I'm going to narrow it down to the Coptic the See of Alexandria, which is what it properly is, the jurisdiction of the Copts. And the question is, have they done enough to keep the youth? Well, I think there's a problem in the question, because the church's role has never been to keep the youth or to keep anybody. That's not what the church does. The church offers things. The church administers things. And it basically holds things out and serves things. That's the church's role. So you only can ask, has the church been giving what it's supposed to give? Then there's another half of the question, which is keeping people or keeping the youth. Well, that's their decision. That's their decision whether to stay or not. Your job is not to keep the people. Your job is to administer what you're supposed to administer. It's the person's decision whether they're going to remain or not, whether they're going to cut themselves off from the sacraments or not. This is that person's call to make. So if somebody leaves, I reject this idea of blaming the church, because if somebody can walk away from the sacraments of Christ, how are you blaming the church on that? So if we want to ask, can the church improve in the way it serves and administers things? Always. It can always improve on that. But that's not what keeps a person. Here's a story. When I was very new in this, I was at confession with Father Daniel, and I was having a very hard time. And at one point he said, "Whoa, thank God." He goes, "It sounded to me like you were going to leave." And I told him, I wish, could say, like, I'm so committed, I'm going to hang in there with you. And I'm not like that, though. I'm sorry, I'm just not. I said, but I can say, like Peter said, where else would I go? This is the truth. This is the truth. So even with these recent controversies going on, if we finally, and I'm going to make up a ridiculous hypothetical, okay? But let's say our bishops all came forward and said, yes, we affirm Protestant music, sermons, and all these sources in the Coptic Church. They're fine with us. And they're all over our parishes, all over the place. And I finally said, I can't take this. I didn't come here for a cheap imitation of what I left. I would have to go over to the Antiochian Church. But you see, I could never leave the church. I couldn't walk away from the sacraments. I would have to go. I would be forced to go into another jurisdiction where I can affirm my bishops and stand under my bishops with a clear conscience and say, I submit myself to your authority. That I would have to do, and theoretically, if all that happened, I would have to at least wrestle with my conscience about it, but I could never leave the church. So one of the questions when somebody leaves is, where did they go? And if they went to a Protestant church, first of all, well, no kidding, you keep pointing and propping them up as being Christians just like we are. Why wouldn't you go there and get the easier road? Why would you go through this hard path and all this fasting and all this stuff and these long liturgies when you can go get happy, clappy, fun time and still get to the same destination? Why on earth would you suffer through all of this? And why would you take a cheesy imitation if you can go get the original? So if they're going there, why should you be surprised? But it also means that they don't understand the sacraments of the church and the authority of the church. So it's not our job to keep anybody. It's our job to offer and administrate the sacraments and the things that we offer, that we've offered for 2,000 years. That's what we offer. But it's not our place to keep people. Why would we think that 100% of people born into a Coptic family are going to accept Jesus Christ? Why would you think that? What percentage of people who grew up in Jerusalem and in Judea accepted Jesus Christ? What percentage walked away? Should we be surprised when people walk away? Should we be surprised when they find this too difficult? When they say, I don't want to pay all these prices. I don't want this cross. I want to go have my best life now. Why would we be surprised if we see people do that? That's what this world is selling them. And if we're not really careful to give them everything we can, we're almost assuring that they're going to leave. And even if you give them all that you can, you have no promises that you're going to keep them here. And offering a pseudo fake orthodoxy, which in Protestant songs or something, to keep them, I have to ask, did you keep them in orthodoxy? Is that orthodoxy? So no, I think that this criticism, of whether the church isn't doing enough to keep them, I don't think that's valid. I think the question is, are we offering all we can? And maybe we should offer a little more in some areas, but the church is not to blame if people leave. Because the fact is, I can point to some amazing people in this church who grew up in the exact same circumstances, and they are devout servants, and they understand our ethos and our spirituality. And they're people I look to, some of them younger than me, some of them half my age, some of them less than half my age, that I look at and say, I want to be more like him. So if the church produced those people, then the church isn't the problem, is it? The same parish produced them. Obviously, I'm not going to blame the church for this. So part of it may be home, part of it may be various factors, but a big bunch of it is their own will and ego and desires of the flesh. Don't we all battle desires of the flesh? Don't you every day battle the desires of the flesh? And if you do, why would you be surprised that somebody gives up on that battle and gives in? Why is that surprising? You have to struggle every day not to do that. So if somebody else does, why should it shock you? And certainly, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, you don't tailor the church to meet the nominal, the one who is indifferent, the one who wants to indulge his flesh, the one who is hanging on by a thread and wants to let go and go enjoy the world. You don't tailor the church around that person, because that's what you will produce, is a bunch of those people. That's not how we do this. The church is for the disciple. That's who it's for. And we urge everybody, come into discipleship. So I hope that wasn't enough to get me in too much trouble. And I want to thank everybody who showed up, and that John Paul Catholic guy. We'll do maybe we'll do another one of these if you guys want to. It'll be a little while, but if you want to, thank you. Pray for me, please. And pray for everybody that's going through these times of turmoil right now. And please, please approach everybody in these discussions as somebody who wants the best for the church and isn't evil and isn't out to hurt others and isn't out to get famous or whatever other things you want to ascribe. Don't do that, please. Please, just look at each other as people who all want the best and want Christ, and just disagree on how to do it. And then let's sit down and talk rationally and not hysterically about how to best do that. Thank you. God bless, and I'll see you next time.